Alright, hello and welcome to the stream. Tonight I'm doing something a little different. I think I've mentioned a bit earlier, but I figure a fun way to officially capstone the year would be to do a top whatever list of the games I streamed. I don't think I played any that I would consider bad, so I figure this should be fun. Now I'm going to be updating, and I do have, now for the record, I have this animation in the middle to show that my stream is not frozen or anything because as I figure if I'm not doing gameplay, I need to at least make sure something is moving so that people know the stream is not didn't freeze or something by accident. Especially since sometimes I have a gap here and there, either because I need to grab a drink or something, and I don't want people getting stuck. It is actually drawn. Did commission this from an artist some time ago. What I usually use as an icon, but here it's just to make sure that the whole thing's not frozen. If you want to find the artist for yourself, their Twitter is Lanmanigans, Lanmanigans. They're really good with artwork, and I very much endorse following them. Alright, so let's see here. Rest sure it's not going to be quiet the entire time, so let's see here. Now, going down my list of games, first things first, I will not be qualifying any game that started, so while I did technically play Hades in January of 2021, that does not qualify because I technically started that in December of 2020, so that's not going to count. So now, I can leave that here. Now, let's see here. What's the next game on the list here? Let's see here. First one's actually Sonic Mania, so let's put something from there. Alright, this will be fine. Not too loud here. Hopefully not drowning out. Let's see here. Next here. Sonic Mania was a really good game to start off the year with because I think I mentioned the start, but I'd had a bit of a falling out with the Sonic series, and this isn't really more due to the games falling apart so much as, well, look, I guess it's just in the general sense. When I replayed them, I realized they weren't exactly as good as I remembered them being. I mean, it did have some really neat stuff, like that legendary sign at the start of Chemical Plant Zone where you can actually go fast enough you outrun the scene itself is really cool, but they all pretty much had a... They're kind of formulaic, I guess, and I'm not sure how to explain it. Technically speaking, Sonic Mania did also have some of the flaws. That is that you had to, you'd often go points in a fight against Eggman/Robotnik where you'd wait for him to attack, then you'd get your turn to attack, then he'd make an attack dodge. But I do remember the older ones had... It did remind me that sometimes the original ones did have a bit more to them. Like, for a lot of Sonic 2, I actually got to the point where I was able to defeat the bosses with the proper hits each time. That's not to say Sonic Mania didn't have some creative bosses. For example, opening up with basically a reference to the ending final boss of Sonic 2 in one of the early levels. It's actually pretty creative and got me thinking strategically about it. And the levels in the general sense were very memorable. I mean, even the ones playing right now, Studiopolis Zone, that's definitely really nice. There's the Western Saloon, those are just really neat. So, yeah, so while the game has its flaws, it's absolutely a really great game and reminded me what made me enjoy the Sonic games in the first place, so... Well, Sonic, it's hard to say where the future goes. As I mentioned, that the Sonic Mania, I distinctly remember coming out around the same time as Sonic Forces, and it does make sense, because apparently the Ruby that the Robotnik/Eggman uses in there is absolutely the same one that was used in Sonic and Forces, and it explains how classic Sonic got there, and which is good because in Forces he seems to come out of nowhere, and does some plot important stuff. It's just really weird, I guess. But Mania explains all that, and I did appreciate them trying to do something with those extra characters, especially in the later DLC, which my copy did come with. It's not too much, but it was nice seeing some of the older obscure characters return and have some relevance there. It did mostly retread the same ground, but that's not inherently a bad thing. You know, like I said, the levels all had a lot of design. The gimmicks weren't obtrusive or anything. It didn't feel like some of the areas like Death Egg Zone, Sonic 3, where it felt like going too fast would be outright self-destructive, given how easy it is to accidentally damage yourself in there if you're going too fast without knowing what you're doing beforehand. I do know speedrunners have gone through those areas just fine and without trouble, but also memorize them. They memorized every single detail about those areas and found exactly what to exploit to go through faster. So I'd say for standard playthroughs or when it's your first time going through is a bit rough, but Mania did not have that issue. And I wish I had more to say about it, but well, I'll definitely be getting a bit more to talk about as we go along the list. I just need to make sure I go through here. I'm really glad that I only really started recording my VODs near the end of 2020. Well, actually, the start of 2020, really. But that makes things a lot easier to go back and try and think about stuff that I've done and continue. Yeah, but Sonic Mania is definitely something I really enjoy playing, and I'm a bit stuck. What else to say? Other than it's a good Sonic game, it reminded me what Sonic games do well, keeping the momentum, not just the speed, but also the general momentum, using the different character gimmicks to synergize with the levels. So, and those can still exist just fine, and I don't regret that at all. Well, it's definitely a good game, but it's got a lot of competition if it's going to stay in this particular order, so I guess we'll be getting that going. But first, alright, next game on the list is alright, let's go with the next one is AI the Somnium Files. Let's see here. What's a good one I can choose here? Here. Oh, these are all really short. Alright, we'll just deal with being really short. Or I could not do that. Right, never mind. Alright, so next things up, we're going to be going with AI the Somnium Files here. And I think I'm going to put that above Sonic Mania. Now, let me just check something here real quick. Okay, this will be fine. I've found some ambience I can use here just fine. Yeah, the Somnium Files was something I actually had not heard of very much before its release, but it was by the same person who made the Zero Escape series, so I knew it was going to be good. In fact, for a while I was wondering if it would do a timeline thing, but oh yeah, I guess I should warn out there's going to be spoilers for all games involved, so let me add include here. Because yeah, I have to discuss these. There we go. Stream title mention include spoilers because I absolutely cannot discuss these at any length without doing that. All right, so yeah, I wasn't sure if this was going to be multiple murder cases, or just one big one, and it turned out to be one big one. But it really did quite a bit, and looking back, it actually did quite a bit with a very small cast. But every single person involved turned out to be important to it in one form or another, even characters like Pewter, who I thought was primarily going to be a background character. And for the most part he was, but then he revealed he was actually a lot more connected than we realized. His poor guy didn't realize he had been manipulated the entire time. All the endings were pretty neat, and it's including one. I even liked the one with where darn, I'm tripping over my words here. I need to take a step back and think here. Or, or, yeah, it was mostly a visual novel without too much of the gameplay, but I didn't mind that because the story was very engaging. And while it did have the supernatural elements like the dream stuff, it wasn't too heavy. In fact, though I do kind of wish it did bring up the parts where you present evidence and stuff. Oh, crap, it ended already. I guess the opening theme was a bit shorter than I expected. Oh well. But yeah. I even I was also glad that when I brought up a few speculations, the characters themselves also brought up the same speculations, so I'm glad they made sure to address the fact that, yeah, this is a pretty logical place for one's brain to go with certain ones, like when we get the video of a strange bear attacking a teen idol. Maybe this was all staged, maybe it was supposed to look that way, but apparently it wasn't. By the end, it was pretty obvious where what was going on with the whole Saito situation. And I was actually kind of surprised. Is to say, and being was set up quite a bit to have some shady dealings, and in fact, in some cases, it looked like he might be the main villain behind everything. But no, in fact, he was definitely involved in some shady stuff, but he had nothing to do with the murders, or at least not directly. Yeah, yeah. But it had some twists and turns, but they were all that made sense within the story, so that's always a good thing. The various endings all had various levels of closure, but more importantly, we now know that the game is going to be getting a sequel within the next year. It might be delayed because a lot of games intended for 2021, 2022, those are still getting various delays. So we might not see it for a while, but I'm absolutely looking forward to it when it does. I'm guessing they'll just have it start off from the true ending there, the one I unlocked at the end. And oh yeah, I did like how it kind of teased that it might be part of it, but no, it's just that Date's memories were coming back because it turns out he did in fact know everything that was going on. It's just that his memory loss from the whole thing made it a lot more difficult to made it so he was pretty much starting fresh, just like we were. And so getting his memories back at the same time we did was pretty straightforward, but easy to follow as well. I'm wondering how much detail I want to go into here, but yeah, I did like how each time that a murder was committed, we had an obvious suspect, and while it did seem to change from time to time, and each time having to consider it, it did turn out that, yeah, it turns out the most likely suspect was the one, just not quite in the way we expected. And while the body swapping thing did add an extra layer, it was one that didn't feel like it was too complicated. It felt like it was well explained, so there was never a case of, oh, come on, how could knowing about that? I mean, even the extra, uh, extra dream machine that had been meant to at one point that they had a prototype going, and then this one, the one we were using was the much more advanced model. Well, and it was actually it took me a bit to yeah, anyone who was watching that far back, it did take me a while to register the final dream sequence was actually him breaking through my character's dream sequence. I thought, oh man, because I felt it was strange that the stuff I was doing wasn't changing time. Well, not entirely, since the whole point was to make it last too long, but then I remembered at the start, oh yeah, each person involved experiences it differently. And that really had a lot going for it. It's a ooh, yeah, I'm really enjoyed it. I'm really looking forward to the sequel, and I hope they continue to make things interesting. I remember the. I also remember there was a bit of a controversy about it, but it's actually kind of funny because it turns out the guy making who would report on the controversy turned out to be the one that started it, the one who posted the forum alert. Turned out to be one causing it, which is actually kind of funny because that kind of mirrors, the the idol obsessed person who was in the game proper. because I'm thinking, wow, you played the game enough to fall in love with the idol character, but not to take the lesson from that about how falling for him was such a how obsessing over someone like that wasn't a good idea. Well, at the end of the day, it got the game more attention, and hope more I hope it gets some more attention when the sequel hits because this was really really good. The Fortunately, I do have to criticize it because while I was playing the game, I did run into quite a few graphical glitches, like a person's face drifting from where they were. I mean, I've heard of controller drift, but face drift. Now, that's something unexpected. But it even got hit again when I started uploading my VODs over to YouTube. But And yeah, and when I start, since I don't really have an artist or anything to make thumbnails, I'm not experienced enough to be doing that myself, or at least, yeah, since I don't have to make them myself, or at least not right at the time of writing, at the time of streaming, rather, or I just went with the default ones, and for the most part, those YouTube does make some decent default options, but when I started doing ones for Sonium files, I could not help but notice almost all of them had some sort of visual glitch present in them, and I thought, wow, was there really that many glitches? And yes. So even just rewatching the VODs, it was very, very common for me to run into those. And it's not I guess it's not a big deal since it's a VN, but at the same time, well, because it is a VN, that means half the time I'm reading out loud in the case of me streaming it, and half the time, and for the rest of it, I'm just watching the events unfold. And so having it go on that much, that's just really awful. I'm one of those people who, if you want, do you have an actual bad game? Because, like I said, none of the games I played this year I would classify as bad. Every single one of them I liked to some degree or another. So rest assured, even any game, whatever game ends up dead last, I still like it. I still loved it. I still don't regret playing it. However, uh, I, s- I'm usually the kind of person who puts technical problems as a bigger issue. With who has a bigger issue. So, like, remember how the how poor Cyberpunk was at release? That would be my example. Or Assassin's Creed Unity. Those are the kind of things I'd consider a worse game than something that attempted to go for a broader theme but kind of falls flat. Not to say there aren't ones that do fall flat here and there, or in that, and I will count them down for that, but when a technical thing happens like that, especially if it takes me out of the immersion, that does really hurt it for me. And for the Somnium Files, even rewatching the VODs, it's well, aside from me also needing to work on the managing my voice and stuff, the problem I had was that it has uh, a lot of those graphical glitches really took me out of the whole experience. I mean, seeing Iris talking about the conspiracy stuff is pretty heavy, but it's a bit hard to take seriously when her face is missing, you know? Or if it's somehow uh, was sunk into their head. It's just awful. I mean, it was pretty funny, but it takes me out of the experience. And while it does have light moments, it is mostly is a mostly serious story, even if it does have light moments. Although I will say that I do genuinely, yeah, you know, you know, still do genuinely enjoy. Still didn't. I'm tripping over my words now. I'm so sorry. Uh, Maybe I should have. Well, I'm not going to make a script for for a stream like this, but I guess I could have at least put some bullet points I wanted to bring up because there's a lot of discussion I want to make on each game, and that's going to become more and more true the closer we get to more recent things, because a lot of it is just really staying in my mind. Let's see here. Yeah, yeah, I'm really. Yeah, I did think the chemistry between Date and and I were really nice. Mizuki was a really interesting character, or, and I'm actually really glad to see that the sequel is going to be starring her because it felt like Date's story had come to a close by the end. And, and while I wouldn't mind some cases that aren't personal, even if it's just a handful of here's various murder mysteries and Date solving them, with the Dream Machine, you know, having going more into Mizuki's character would be pretty nice because one of the endings I actually did like was the one with him and her, even though that's technically not one of the better endings since Saito does unfortunately get to murder two people there, with the third being on their way out thanks to Iris's brain tumor, unfortunately, meaning that Ace being stuck in her head is not going to be able to last long, which is very unfortunate. But the murder is at least stopped, so there's no chance of Saito returning there. And Mizuki and Date reconnect to their strained relate after their relationship was strained for part of the story. That was definitely one of the stronger beats. It's strictly speaking, it's not the best ending because, like I said, it does suffer from there being a lot more casualties compared to in the best ending. But it's definitely one I was glad to see happen, simply because there's a lot of stuff that went on within the characters involved, and seeing them reconnect like that, it just meant a lot, really. And I hope we can get some more moments like that with the sequel, the Nirvana Initiative, I believe it's called. Alright, let's see here. Let's get some iconoclast music here. Here we go. Is there an extended version I can have in the background? Let's see. There's one for the Ivory Beast. Let's go with that one. Alright, there we go. Now, iconoclasts. This was actually recommended to me by a friend a while ago because it was by one of the indie devs they are personally connected to, and I must say I am actually quite impressed. It had virtually no glitches. It had a lot of really fun boss fights, and despite having a small cast, each one left an impression, to be sure. Even the main character, Robin, despite not being a traditional silent protagonist, had shown a lot of character with her upbeat attitude and determination and all that. So, now the bad news is the game is not. Now the bad news, the game is not the best as far as actual Metroidvania stuff. But ones I've played earlier, like Ori and Blind Forest, even one of the future ones we'll be getting to on this list, have a lot better reasons to explore. In Iconoclasts, you mostly just get crafting materials. The most important one, the free extra hit. So the free extra hit is a recipe you start with, so you should absolutely be getting that without trouble. But even the music that's playing right now during the battles against the agents, those were pretty heavy stuff. Now, I've seen some speculation around of what, well, actually, before anything, I'm actually sad to learn that Iconoclast came out, like, 2 days before Celeste, because while Celeste is a great game, the fact it hit close to home for so many people means it's going, and especially since it hit such a pretty big deal, such a pretty big theme, means that Iconoclast unfortunately got completely overshadowed, and that's a shame because this is a genuinely good game, it covers some genuinely good stuff, and the characters are all really memorable. All in one way or the characters are all having some good chemistry, they're quite memorable, and, well, I guess if I had to name the things that Iconoclast did best, it would be the boss fights and the story itself. Because, did a good job of keeping me engaged, and even once it seemed like it was wrapping up, I wasn't entirely sure what was going on, but not in a bad way. Yeah. The fights were absolutely, they were just amazing. I mean, I think I've mentioned it multiple times throughout the year that my favorite are the kinds of boss fights are ones that mix both the mechanics and the story with them. And indeed, they do that pretty well. You can tell. For the mechanical bosses, they're pretty static, but meanwhile, the actual human bosses will change, possibly even getting desperate as their health goes down. I mean, though I will say, one of my disappointments was actually the mother, because despite her being the closest thing the game had to actually, let's put this on the list. I'm having trouble deciding if I want to put it before or after AI the Somnium Files, because it's better than... I'd put it higher than Sonic Mania, but... You know what, since it has some really good... Since it wasn't just a good story, but also fun gameplay-wise, I'll go ahead and put it here. Because this was a genuinely great game. And I do wish it got a lot more love, because it's really, really good. But yeah, the mother was the closest thing to a main antagonist for the entire game, but we kind of just defeat her once and then she falls apart. I mean, no, we fight... And from there, the rest of the members of the corporate cult kind of drop like flies, which is honestly well, it makes sense, and I don't mind it, but for a while, then I wasn't entirely sure what to do next. But then when I saw the space worm stuff, okay, so me and Royal go over her, but the negotiations unfortunately break down, which unfortunately I kind of expected since it's a video game. It's not gonna end without a final boss. And there's actually a pretty heavy scene there. Actually, in general sense, they have some pretty heavy scenes. I mean, even one part where Robin goes into the pits to gather an item, but refuses to let her tell her friend what it was, or even allow you to go down the ladder afterward. You can tell, well, Robin was really bothered by that. That's even though she never spoke, just from the fact she wouldn't let... the game doesn't even let you go down that ladder, because you can tell it's Robin saying, no, we're not going down there, I don't want to show her what's going on. It does definitely cover a lot of other stuff, both on the material stuff, like the mad science and corporate structure, but it also covers some religious stuff, such as the hero's argument into Robin's brother and friend get into at one point. Dang. And yeah, Agent Black is definitely one of my favorite bosses for sure, because she actually felt similar to what we probably should have gone with the Mother, where the Mother was a recurring antagonist throughout the game, because like I said, she's the closest thing to an overall villain. In a sense, she was running the corporate cult and has such powerful ivory magic that she's practically a goddess herself, and that's pretty big. Especially since she's mastered it. Unlike her son Royal, well, quote-unquote son, I don't think they're technically blood-related, but you get what I mean. He hasn't nearly mastered his power in time. So there's a lot of problems there. So yeah, there was a bit of a big uphill battle to speak with her to try and fix what's going on. And of course, Mina, the best buddy of Robin. Apparently, depending on some events you do, you can actually get her to join you for the final battle, but I did not do those, unfortunately, so a bit disappointing, but I don't think it's too bad. At the end of the day, with the world ending, it makes sense she wanted to be with family. And while she could have helped us against the space trucker, now that's rather interesting. They all thought the space worm was some sort of deity that granted them their ivory magic, but in reality, the planet created ivory to basically make a starship fuel. That was an interesting twist right there. Yeah, I decided to take the whole thing as a... Yeah, I decided to take the concern and interpret them as a corporate cult, because while there are a lot of religious terms stuff, I felt they made more sense as a sort of company that, since they provide everything people need to live, and they just happen to use religious stuff because, yeah, we could meme about if Jeff Bezos demanded that the CEO become the father, everyone call him the father, and everyone refer to each one as like bishops, mediums, and all that religious terminology. Yeah, yeah, like the mother was here. Yeah, we don't meme on it, but come 30 or so years when the next generation, people will just take that as standard, and the difference and that's actually kind of horrifying to think about. To the difference between religious and corporate stuff, it just goes away because the company decided to use it like that. But some have been taking it as more of a direct cult rather than a company, and that's perfectly fine. Others, but I guess I just personally got some real Shinra Corporation vibes from them, and that's probably didn't help by the fact that in 2020 I did play Final Fantasy VII for the first time. Original, not remake. I'm waiting until all episodes are done before I play the remake. Yeah. Actually, and of course, I was expecting. After the mother died, I thought, well, maybe General Chrome will be carrying the story, and he did for a little while, but yeah, that was actually kind of, yeah, he was a kind of interesting character himself, taking the religious part and pretty much dropping the company part entirely. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, it was kind of interesting seeing him scold the mother in her final moment, and it's about how she was treating, as a, how he felt even she had lost sight of the whole thing. Pretty big stuff. Yeah, but I guess he did. It makes sense. The assassins, he thought he was invincible at that point. He felt he was chosen above the mother after an assassination attempt on himself was failed. But he didn't realize that the exploding thing was only used as a. Basically it was a two-piece chemical thing, and he had only been given half of it. So when Robin's brother Elro, he puts in the second half, he was in for a rude awakening. Oh yes, Elro is another thing that I unfortunately have to mark down as a bit of a disappointment. While I can respect the fact that he just wants to be with his sister in the end of the world, he just wants that all this fighting feels pointless to him. Because all that comes near the end of the game and he refuses to push the button, and forcing someone else to do it for him, there's just no time left. Even once the negotiations with the creature fall down, and we have to return from the moon to the planet, well, from the space station to the planet, he still doesn't move anything, and I guess I felt like he needed a bit of something. Either admit that Robin should be old enough to make her own decisions, or that she should. Because the whole thing, he keeps saying that he knows what's best for her, he needs to control her, which usually leads to the said person eventually learning the person they care about is an adult who can make their own decisions. But he doesn't do that until you've already beaten the game. And that point feels like, well, you saved the entire world and made everything sustainable. Oh, thanks to using the ivory with the earth seeds. Oh, the seeds. I actually think that was a really, really interesting plot development, because while the seeds were the only thing that was able to kill the agents for good, the fact they're just ordinary earth seeds that react violently from the ivory, that was actually kind of interesting. And of course, it was hinted a while ago that the humans had all come to the Ivory Planet for quite some time ago, so they weren't natural members of it. But it was not until you see the second ship that arrived there at the One Concern that you realize is exactly what's going on with that. Of course. And yeah, the music was also really good. I'm really glad I was able to get this one working. I really appreciate when people put up these extended ones without ads, because that's just annoying to have to deal with. Unfortunately, we may have to deal with it a few times along this way, because I'm hoping to change it with each game I discuss. But hopefully there'll still be at least a decent amount of them going. And of course, the little extra bonus bosses against the Mother's Corners and Fitzroy were pretty fun fights. I was worried they might be a bit too hard, but it worked out better than I expected. And it does kind of show the problem with basically living forever like that. I guess it explains, after all, even the previous CEO of One Concern, the father, was pretty much on his deathbed, as we saw at the end there. And that's why the mother took over after him. And I was sad we couldn't save Royal. I just made an extra save because I was hoping maybe, but I think even at the time I realized they were clearly not trying to allow that. Because even if you found a way to get past that door that requires him in a different spot to open because of its because of its damage, normally it doesn't require that. The boxes in the very next room are way too tall for you to be able to jump over while carrying him. It's absolutely impossible to get there to get back to the planet without leaving him behind. I guess they absolutely needed to be sure that anyone with Ivory powers had to be gone by the end. And of course, Agent Black was a very climactic battle. Well, even with the mother gone, with the One Concern falling apart around her, she was just so pissed because we took everything that mattered to her, and she just wants to stop us at any cost. Frankly, she could have been the final boss, and I would have still said the game had a very satisfying conclusion. But dang. Yeah, the space trucker was certainly a surprise, but not a bad one. No, it didn't feel out of nowhere, and it was definitely way more different than I was expecting. But it was a good one, yeah. I can see why my buddy was pushing me to play this game for so long, and I'm glad that the dev is doing better. Apparently, after they finished, they had worked themselves too hard. Luckily, they've recovered since, and while I do hope they'd make another great game like this, I do hope they also remember to take breaks regularly on it, because this is just really, really good stuff. But they clearly have a lot of skill, and I don't believe I ran into any bugs or anything. Alright, let's see here. What's after Iconoclasts? Alright. Alright, let's see here. Is there an extended here? Okay, next up is Persona 4. Let's see here. Persona 4. Oh, there's a decent amount here, but I need to find one that doesn't have ads. Let's see here. Here we are. New. Adachi's theme. I believe. Yeah. I think I mentioned that I had played. Well, actually, I should probably think about how to place this one. I want to place these before I talk about them, so that people know what I'm talking about if they step in or when they watch it here, if they watch it on YouTube. So, well, as a Shin Megami Tensei fan, I absolutely am biased in favor of this thing. But it's a bit Iconoclasts. Well, the thing that makes Persona interesting is while the life sim elements are a bit contested within the SMT fandom, to put it extremely lightly, I can easily see why it's popular, because it does genuinely add an extra layer. It's kind of like how in XCOM you have both the actual combat sections where you get to use your weapons to get some resources, and then the research phase where you get to create new items where you can then enjoy them to use them in the combat sections, which then creates just a fun feedback loop like that. And Persona games are pretty good for that. But they allow you to get some pretty good... yeah, the Persona games have the life sim stuff, which help you get stats and stuff that will assist you in the combat sections. The combat sections are important for helping progress the main area. And I'm really glad that I genuinely forgot who the killer was beforehand, because that made trying to deduce it a lot more interesting. I will be honest and say that as a murder mystery, it's nowhere near as intriguing as AI the Somnium Files, but at the same time, it was still an engaging story. It had it did have a bit of filler to it, but as I mentioned at the time, I understand they can't have it dark all the time. But Persona games are a bit lighter than the standard SMT games, but they also... well, even the opening scene of Persona 4 makes it clear. It's a it's a bit more of a lighter game with some messed up stuff and bubbling beneath the surface. So, which is perfectly fine. I can absolutely get behind that. The gameplay was enjoyable. Playing around with the personas is just as fun as playing around with the demon teams in a mainline game, and the overworld stuff. I don't know. I really want to put Persona 4 right at the top right now, but at the same time, some of the characters felt weaker than others. I mean, ones like Kanji Nodo. But then again, and even though some like hey were a bit less complex, but at the same time, like I said, they're really some characters who don't have a sob story are important, so to keep it from getting too depressing. I mean, if everyone's got a sob story, then sob stories become a lot less special, you know? I mean, people, and on that sort, I'm not sure how I feel about Teddy. I mean, people meme that about him being awful, but I found his story about existentialism working rather well. About what he is or his purpose. That's a pretty relatable thing, and I don't like how he kept hitting on the girls and all that. In fact, that's kind of what when he decided to go with the surprise party and asked for a kiss. I thought, you know what, let's mess with him, let's do it. Just because that's funny. But I don't hate him or anything. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's not like his... well, it was pretty easy to figure he must be a shadow himself. Having some kind of identity at all is... make him an exception among exceptions. Well, it makes sense he wouldn't exactly know where to be. I'm absolutely on the fence on this one, if we're honest. I'm incredibly biased here, but fine, let's go. Persona 4, right at the top, right here. That's not to say I don't have complaints. For example, even though I did romance... Marie, I do want to point out that I literally only did that with anyone because an achievement required it at one point or another. Naoto was in the top running, but with the chemistry in her and Kanji, I figure I should not get in the way of this, because while she will choose you over him if you romance her, that's because she's required to if the player wants her, because the player always gets priority. And this isn't inherently a Persona thing either. Harvest Moon games, well, Story of Seasons games rather, prior to that split. Story of Seasons games have some games with love rivals where they try to hook up with a certain character, where guys and girls will be hooking up if your character doesn't hook up with any of them first. And I think this is in Rune Factory as well, and a common complaint with those is that because there's usually a whole storyline about them meeting up and falling in love, some people feel like kind of goes against the idea of having the player choose someone because it feels like you're getting in the way of the potentially well-written romance, you know? And that is definitely the case here as well. And I imagine that's also why Stardew Valley doesn't have love rivals. That way it doesn't feel like you're getting in the way of anyone. Still, well, I did enjoy messing around with this, and while my guide ended up being rather pointless, I did at least enjoy the bonus dungeon that came out of it. easily restore my resources or anything, so I absolutely had to be much more careful about use of items, equipment, what party members I bring, all those things. And the bosses actually made me have to consider item usage, which is not always something I do in SMT games. Well, aside from curative items, obviously. Oh, and I am glad that, to being an adult, I can actually appreciate and hate Adachi as a villain more. But I'm gonna be honest here, when I played through, for most of the story, I genuinely was convinced Dojima was behind it, and that he was screwing us over the whole time. In fact, that would also explain why Adachi was secretly giving us hints here and there, because that would actually make a lot of sense. After all, it was well, Nako made it clear that her father was being a bit more distant ever since their mother died. So it's possible he might have simply lost it, and Adachi, being his partner, knew something was up, but he couldn't bring himself to do something, so he was giving us clues to try and do something, since he lacked the fortitude to do it. But Adachi's story does make sense as well. Although, after all, he kind of foregoed friendships and stuff for the sake of working on his career, and indeed, he graduated at possibly even top of his class. He managed to get the job he wanted as a police detective, and then gets assigned to some podunk town in the middle of nowhere, expecting to just be forgotten as things goes by, since nothing happens there, and the town's so small. That's another thing. Inaba did genuinely feel like a tiny town in the middle of nowhere. My understanding is that only Golden allows you to go to the city, and I must say, I found myself going to the city a lot more later in the game because there's not very much in Inaba, which makes it a lot easier to connect to Adachi, because while the city was indeed just a motor scooter drive away, that still means if you want to go something interesting, you have to leave town entirely, which works thematically, I think. And after going through Adachi's social link off-stream, I thought, wow, this is actually... I kind of wish I did this one instead of Marie's, because to be honest, Marie felt tacked on. I mentioned that it did feel like the game was trying to push her as a potential relationship partner, and to be fair, it does, but that's also because it kind of forces the whole party to grow attached to her so that everyone will care about her in the final bonus dungeon. That said, I do feel like her bed was a bit... Like I said, you can tell that Marie was a tacked on part for Golden Remake, both in her design, since she looks so different from the rest of the Velvet Room crew, as well as in terms of what she does in the story itself, because it still works perfectly fine if she's removed. I guess I can only assume that for the remake they wanted to add some additional characters to try and make things more interesting, but I think Adachi's is a lot better because he basically goes through him befriending an elderly lady who goes to the store that he hangs out in, but as soon as her son goes back, she abandons Adachi to hang out with her son again, and Adachi basically just says, yeah, that's how it usually goes, and that really made me understand him a lot more. Now, yeah, like I said, the fact that he gets stuck in a dead-end job in the middle of nowhere with people constantly leaving, I can see why Adachi is the way he is. And of course, it also makes sense he's not too happy about a bunch of kids tell him, well, you just didn't try hard enough. Well, yeah, I can absolutely understand his frustration there, and why he feels that way. Not to say that I agree with Adachi, I think he was right. Absolutely not. But I can also understand why he wasn't really swayed by the kids trying to talk him down. But I do agree with Node that to some extent, he's probably making excuses for himself to justify everything. After all, he decided to go with someone who explicitly intends to destroy the world simply because he felt lost with no place to go in life. That's kind of extreme, don't you think? On a personal interpretation note, I know that this is technically wrong because he appears in later games like the arena and the fighting game and other stuff, but I actually got the impression that Adachi actually isn't really much of a fighter. I mean, his persona is basically just a corrupted version of the one we start with, which by itself could actually be a nice implication that he hasn't really grown much, he hasn't done much. Meanwhile, our protagonist has generally upgraded personas to even more powerful ones, which does do a lot of good thematic stuff. But yeah, not only that, when it becomes clear Adachi's losing, he simply allows the fog to take control of him. Now, unfortunately, Izanami was indeed something. Well, it wasn't Izanami specifically I remembered, but I did remember the gas station attendant was more important than expected, but to be fair, it's not very difficult to deduce that even if I hadn't, because it had to be someone that anyone out of town would interact with. In fact, the matter is, there's only one person we interacted with the day we arrived, and that was the gas station. That wasn't Dojima and the family, it was the gas station attendant. But yeah, that was a bit disappointing, but I did at least enjoy figuring out that it was indeed Adachi. And I figured that out as soon as Dojima attempted to save our cousin, but she ended up but he ended up getting hit by a vehicle on the way there. Judging by the fact that the kidnapping and everything still occurred, even though he was out of commission, means it couldn't be anyone else. It had to be Adachi, because he's the only. Because while it theoretically could have been anyone else from the police station, he's the only other one with a portrait and name, which kind of, unfortunately, does kind of ruin the mystery a bit. But yeah, this was absolutely an amazing. That was yeah. It was a lot of fun gameplay-wise, though, figuring out. I did try to use a lot of those upgrades, but while I did try to find ways to abuse Sage, is a big party buff and everything. The fact that it cost basically your entire MP bar means that it probably wasn't worth it, if we're completely honest, but I thought it was fun experimenting with the party near the end, and at the end of the day, the reason I like SMT games so much, including Persona, is the fact that you're allowed to experiment, you're allowed to screw around and see what works and what doesn't. Sure, there's some pretty strong things you can use with it, but yeah, there's a bunch of really strong stuff you can make on your own, but the nature of the battles being open-ended, it means you can actually get away with it quite a bit, and so why I was even able to beat Yukiko's shadow at the start of the game, despite being a bit under-leveled. Well, simply because I knew what I was doing and how to go about it. Though granted, I will have to openly admit, as far as SMT games go, Persona 4 was very easy, even when I don't grind. And while I do want to say that at least part of that is because I have experience with the games and have done them a lot, the fact of the matter is I only got a few game overs from some ridiculous stuff, of usually accidentally reflecting, absorbing, losing turns like that to allow the enemy more time to blow me to smithereens. Still, it's good when a game over feels like, well, that was entirely my fault, wasn't it? Rather than bad luck. Although I suppose I can't sit here and say luck had nothing to do with it, because sometimes enemies just playing get a crit, or happen to choose the right person with the right weakness, which is also why I end up using Naoto so much near the end, because she absolutely has no weaknesses. But yeah, I may have been late to the party, but this was genuinely a fun game. It definitely felt like a step up from Persona 3 in basically everything. I do like the characters, and I do want to... Yeah, and I do want to say, while some do say that Persona games are better for characters and SMT games are better for the main story, I don't think the main story in Persona 4 is bad at all, or in 3 for that matters. Though I suppose I still have to sit here and say 3 is close to my heart, simply because it covered a lot of themes of self-abuse and stuff that during a time I myself was suffering from those, so I'm probably going to be nicer to it than I probably should be. Oh well. Matters is there's definitely a step up here, and all the same, I do think it was Persona 4 had a good characters, a good main story, and while some of the stuff does stick out as potentially annoying, like maybe being a little tacked on. And I still think it was very strong in the general sense, and I hope that Persona 5 Royal does get a Steam release eventually. On that note, even though SMT5 came out this year, I cannot qualify. I can't even put this on the do not qualify list because I did not stream it, and this is supposed to be purely games that I streamed this year. But rest assured, that was a legitimately fun game and legitimately hard. Alright, now let's see. What's after Persona 4? That was a pretty long one, but... Oh yeah, fun fact, I think I mentioned this earlier, but when I got my most watched streams for the year, Persona 4 was actually number 1. Oh yeah, technically I did play World of Warcraft this year, didn't I? I first immediately started with Shadowlands, so I'm going to have to place it here. And surprise of absolutely no one, because anyone who doesn't know probably has heard about all that. So I'm going to put the Blizzard stuff to the side for now and go entirely as the game itself. Yeah, surprise of absolutely no one, this one is going to have to be below Sonic Mania, because while there are lots of World of Warcraft storylines, oh, right, I need to put, actually, what's a good Warcraft theme, World of Warcraft theme? Hmm, hmm. I generally don't know, but it's not like the game has bad music either. Uh, alright, let's see here. Uh, see if I can find something. Let's go with Elwyn Forest. Here. Alright, Elwyn Forest it is. Now, like I said, I don't hate anything I played this year, and that does also apply to World of Warcraft here. Bruh. In fact, like I said, there's actually quite a few of the storylines in World of Warcraft that I did genuinely enjoy. Now, with that in mind, I do need to point out that the way it worked, for anyone who hasn't played, when Shadowlands released, they made all the old expansions basically a form of leveling content, where you speak with the Time Dragon Chromie. I think technically she's a bronze dragon, but basically they're just time dragons. And she transports you to one that you level through until you reach the level for Shadowlands, at which point she teleports you to the quote-unquote current timeline and do the content there. I experimented a lot with the various characters there to try out these different areas, and the surprise of absolutely no one, I ended up liking ones like Wrath of the Lich King, the King, the quite a bit. The Legion expansion main story was really neat as well. I did do some of the other early stuff like Burning Crusade, Cataclysm, and such, but those don't technically have a primary storyline so much as each area has a bit of a story to it, and the main thing is elsewhere. Like, you don't... While Illidan in Burning Crusades areas is touched upon, he doesn't really do... He's not really relevant until near the end, when you actually fight him. I did like what... Hey, I did like that Legion did, bringing him back as an anti-hero, though I heard that, I've never played Warcraft 1, 2, or 3, the original RTS games, unfortunately. I was planning to try Warcraft 3 when Reforged came out, but then that big disaster happened, and so much for that. Much for those plans. Yeah, I'd heard they did some questionable things with him, but... So all I know is that in Burning Crusade he was kind of a straightforward villain, and then brought back in Legion as an anti-hero, but I did like how they handled him, which is the same because of how badly they've ruined Sylvanas, who is basically a villain for the entire storyline, and then they kind of try to redeem her out of basically nowhere. I don't know. Yeah, I did like Lich King. I only knew Arthas. I only really met Arthas through that and some Heroes of the Storm, but he was actually a pretty neat character. And now I finally understand the Arthas did nothing wrong memes. I actually did like the Warlords of Draenor main storyline. I'm not sure if that's a hot take or not, but I did kind of enjoy seeing the alternate timeline where the Outlands didn't have everything go to hell, and all that, having Garrosh slowly move more and more extreme. It was an engaging storyline, I thought. Shadowlands, I didn't. Well, I guess should probably address the. Missing Pandaria was alright, I guess. It's, Battle for Azeroth, I did like the way the Horde one started, being in an Aztec themed area with dinosaurs, but it kind of fell apart after a bit. It just became less interesting. Yeah, I guess. And the Alliance one, I'm thinking about it at the time, said wow, this pirate area feels like Limsa Lominsa over Final Fantasy XIV, except significantly less interesting. And yes, I am highly biased in favor of 14, I will be honest and say that. But yeah, Battle for Azeroth, quickly saw why people felt it wasn't nearly as engaging as other stuff. And that was before I found out, oh, all of the endgame content from each expansion is flat out gone! I genuinely didn't realize that was a thing, and that puts a lot more context into why people liked the vanilla and stuffs and early expansions so much, because the stuff that was good there is probably all gone by the time I had gotten there. Or, yeah. For anyone wondering about if I played the server there, not very much, because unfortunately by the time I played, Phase 2 had already been in place for a while, and anyone who is probably aware of the memes where Phase 1 was the fun part, and Phase 2, everyone's just min-maxing going through there, and, well, I did enjoy yeah, the raids, at least enjoy the raids and in Shadowlands, stuff like, as well as checking out some of the storylines of the earlier raids that were still around. And the fact of the matter is, there's basically no mechanics to the raids in vanilla made me a bit less enthusiastic, because I'm basically rushing to endgame for something that's, well, not as fun, I guess. So, and I do have, as I've mentioned, I do actually have quite a bit of an history with MMOs over the past, so, but including, I can even remember some stuff with Ultima Online. Nothing that I think particularly positive about, but that's why. But then again, that's what happens if you go into MMO and don't really socialize. So I guess to be fair, yeah, I was gonna say it was when I started socializing in MMOs like Dungeon Fighter Online that I really started enjoying them a lot more. But then when I thought about it, I thought, well, another thing is that even as time goes by, it's become a lot more convenient to use stuff like Skype or Discord than in-game chat, and I think that's another thing that's unfortunately a hit towards MMO socialization. It's nice that MMOs are getting a bit of a resurgence nowadays, thanks to lockdown and stuff, giving people reason to try games that involve lots of commitment like that. Uh, and but yeah, unfortunately, Shadowlands, while it did genuinely have some fun raids like against Sire Dethanarius, or however Dentharius? Completely forgot how it's pronounced, but it was actually a legitimately fun raid fight. And of course, for my streams here, I mostly did Mythic Plus, and I will hold, that is, the way Warcraft handles dungeons is genuinely better than Final Fantasy XIV's, because while Final Fantasy XIV typically has better stories for its dungeons, that is, you rarely have a reason to return unless it's specifically for roulette asking you to go back there. Meanwhile, in Warcraft, it's common to go back through Mythic Plus dungeons just to try out the different stuff. Sometimes it'll be a disaster, sometimes it'll go well. I think I was a bit hard on myself in some places, but what matters is I had a lot of fun with those guys there, and I think and the fact I had a lot of fun doing that is probably the most important part. Though, again, I still do think World of Warcraft did genuinely have some great storyline stuff for it. Um, But unfortunately, Shadowlands did have a lot of tedium to it. Like, I probably would have liked Torghast a lot more if it was just once per week instead of two, for example. And I don't mind the reputation grinds and stuff. I have a moderately high grind tolerance compared to most, thanks to my history of MMOs. So I was not bothered as much by the is requiring to grind stuff. But I will definitely agree there was really not much reason for the covenants to be split so hard like that. To, especially given I don't my subscription ended long ago, rest assured, but apparently while they are finally fixing that problem, by allowing you to switch covenants at will, they're having some characters who are only important to the Kyrian, the angel slash Valkyrie themed area in the upcoming plot line. And while I did do that storyline on my monk, if I had only focused on my main, my arcane mage, I would have never known anything about them because they aren't present at all in the Night Fae campaign, which I selected for my mage purely for character story reasons. I just simply felt my arcane mage would care more about trying to keep the world in natural order, natural balance. I thought that was pretty neat. Aesthetically, I do genuinely like the areas they had. I mean, uh, the Night Fae area, Ardenwald, feels like a genuinely otherworldly area. Uh, and being a bastion, the Kyrian era bastion, being basically a totally not heaven area, it certainly feels that way with how beautiful everything was there. Or, and of course, the combat and science focused uh, Necrolords area. What's it called? I guess I've already forgotten. Oh well. Yeah, I did genuinely like the new areas, but the Maw was probably the most boring one, which makes sense. It's supposed to be basically hell, but you also have to spend a decent amount of time there, both for reputation grind and also stuff for your covenant. So, which I wouldn't have minded if you could mount, but you couldn't until the first major patch, which was kind of disappointing. I'm not going to lie about that. But apparently, I speak with friends, apparently that's a standard thing where there's some inconveniences going on, but then they add them in later patches. And I was a bit confused when I learned just how much had been taken out of the game, because the way Final Fantasy XIV works is everything is just, whenever they add something, it just stays there. They just add the new expanded stuff on top of all that, so if you want to do some anything old outdated of like a relic grind or whatever, you can do that. There's not there's arguably not much reason to do that unless you just really like the weapon skin for the relic weapons case, but you can do that. It doesn't go away, nor do technically the bonuses, even though it's not relevant content anymore. Meanwhile, when I went to Legion, got my relic weapon, was really excited because based off if what I've read is true, I actually genuinely do think Legion's artifact weapons were handled better than Final Fantasy XIV's relics, because the artifact weapons you can unlock various appearances for, you can customize the stats a lot more easily, and it even changes your build a bit, which is really neat. But when I got the item myself, it said legacy item, does not do anything anymore. That was a bit of a letdown, and naturally it was a bigger letdown when I found out, oh yeah, that's normal. Normal? Dang. Yeah. I am genuinely glad I tried with the World of Warcraft. Even if it's just the modern version, and with all of its flaws, it still had a lot of really great stuff in it. That's kind of a shame. It's just left. It's tripping over my own words again. It's just a shame they left so much behind, and I joined a bit too late to join the phase 1 for the classic server, because I would not have minded going through with that as long as since I'm not against a classic MMO thing. I mean, with Final Fantasy XIV, Eureka and the Bosjan Battlegrounds were all designed to be separate instance areas that were supposed to emulate the release of a new MMO, and it did bring back some very positive memories, both of them. Though for or at least Eureka did. Bozjan I could not play until afterwards, so everyone there was just farming. So unfortunately I could not appreciate Bozjan. I am sorry for fibbing. But Eureka absolutely was there of its release, the controversy over how grindy it was, and all that. I'm very glad I got to try out World of Warcraft, even if I feel like I've gotten everything I wanted out of it, and with now those guys have gone their separate ways into other games, some to Guild Wars 2, some to other stuff, some to 14, some to other games. Because I feel there's no reason to be going back there, so I highly doubt I'm going back, but I do not regret my time there, so like I said, no matter how low on the totem pole a game is here, I do not regret any of them, and I still genuinely enjoyed them. It's just a shame that Warcraft is now one of those games even if you like, you have to apologize. Anything about you do like about it, you have to apologize for its parents. Well, I do hope it can make a comeback eventually. Even if I don't play it myself, it will be rather nice to see another great MMO, because there really should be more than one at the top. They should be fighting a for competition, you know? I mean, yeah, I do like Final Fantasy 14. It's nice having it at the top, but well, first of all, even with its popularity now, it is nowhere as popular as Warcraft was during Lich King, where I believe it was at its absolute peak. And even then, I would not like 14 to fall into the same mistakes that Warcraft is, where they just kind of go through the motions. I want them to continue pushing their own limits. So, and a stronger competition will absolutely help that a lot more. Now let's see here. Ooh, a Mori. Ooh, now this one's going to be a little more tough to try and figure out. Hmm. A Mori. Mori had a great story, but a very straightforward battle system. I do like that you could have multiple team-based attacks, though. I guess I could put it... I'm gonna have to put it below Iconoclasts. Sorry, Amori. Because while I do genuinely like the game and can connect with a lot of the feelings of fear, depression, and such that it deals with, and I do think it handles quite a few of them well, I can't overlook the fact that near the end of the game, it kind of loses steam. I'm glad it did not do the shut-in storyline, because while it does go into a bit more with the dream areas, it kind of falls apart near the... It has the same actual endings as the one I played. I mean, genuinely had no idea what kind of game I was in for at the start, aside from the usual Earthbound-like stuff. And on that note, while Earthbound-like games are kind of overdone right now, first of all, that doesn't mean it can't still be good, but more importantly, apparently Amori's original release date was actually supposed to be in the same year as Least the Painful and Undertale, so kind of funny that it will all come out there, but unfortunately the original creator underestimated the amount of work it required, and it led to a lot of drama. Unfortunate, but the good news is the game ended up good, great even, and a game's flaws are a lot, the flaws in development are a lot easier to overlook when the game itself ends up good, at least. And hopefully the dev takes the painful lessons they took from the development cycle if they make another game. And I do hope they make another game, because Omori shows they really are talented. Not only does it have a very memorable art style in everything, but it doesn't feel like it's chasing a trend or copying anything major. It just feels like it's doing its own thing, and it does it well. Well, that said, once you realize what the dream world is just a reflection. Oh, thank you, Ukyo. What's this? Ah, I've just been doing a countdown of the games I streamed this year, roughly putting them in order of which ones I like the most to like the least, and for the record, I have none that I hate or dislike. So even the ones at the very bottom, I still enjoyed playing. And so I'm discussing a bit about each and every one of them so far. Slime Rancher. Slime Rancher was not from this year, unfortunately. Otherwise, it would be on this list. Definitely be pretty high on this list. Yeah, sad indeed. And yeah, for do not qualify as anything that was started in 2020 and ended in 2021, or anything that I've replayed. So Hades, unfortunately, cannot be on this list because while I did play it in January of 2021, I did begin in 2020. Alright. Yeah, I love the, I did like how Omori had tied the emotions things to the characters, and it even had a nice, creativity with stuff like you being able to become more mad or more happy or more sad to affect it in sort of triangle matter. Or, I mentioned before that I like when a game puts its themes in its actual mixes a game's themes with its mechanics, and that really did well there. Or, it's not a very hard game, but it's also well, very thematic. The art style being with absolutely everything. I mean, there was absolutely no default RPG Maker stuff in there. You can tell a lot of love and a lot of work went into it. Though unfortunately, I do feel that near the later half of the game, it kind of loses some steam. The whale dungeon in particular is one that I feel dragged on a lot longer than it needed to be. Yeah. But at least it does have a pretty strong ending. And sorry, I guess I should have thought of some bullet points. Maybe I should have put some bullet points for each of these games so that I could cover each one specifically. Yeah. Obviously, I'm not going to script out an entire stream. That would be a little silly and defeat the purpose. But it'll at least give me something to keep my thoughts in order rather than just whatever comes to mind. Alrighty, now what came out... Alright, now what came out after Amori? Alright. Alright, Night in the Woods is unfortunately going to have to be on this list, does not qualify, because I've already replayed that. Night in the Woods. Night in the Woods is still a very special game to me because it connected... Because, well, I didn't leave college due to a mental breakdown, I just kind of lost my way, I guess. So I couldn't figure out... Oh wait, I can actually play Night in the Woods theme here, let's see here. See if I can find an extended main theme to play in the background while I talk about it. Ah, here we are. Of course, there's an ad on that one. Ah, there we are. Night in the Woods is has always been a special game to me because while it's basically just VN, it really gets you into the head of the characters that interact there. It does a pretty good job of mixing of is it real or is there supernatural stuff involved or is it just on the characters' heads. It keeps it ambiguous and I do appreciate that. It does a good job of handling the I guess sorry, I guess I need to gather my thoughts a bit here, but a lot of stuff that goes on in the game is even stuff I've felt myself, like like I brought up during the game time I played that I actually did have a mall near where I lived that was really bustling, and in fact when I was a kid they even had some events where you'd spend the night with a group there, and it was really neat, but it, unfortunately, like many malls, indoor malls, it kind of fell into disrepair, and apparently they actually demolished it a while ago. So unfortunately, it is not there anymore. And of course, the reason I did the B path is because hers always felt really special, about her having to deal with a lot of issues trying to find a future that she feels denied, that she doesn't appreciate because Because for her, May going to college and all that was like living the path that she couldn't, only for May to come back as if nothing happened, which caused problems, of course, even for the parents who had to do a lot just to get their jobs going. Just to get the payment for the college, I mean. And college has not gotten any cheaper. I'm glad. And of course. So when I flunked out the first time because I just didn't enjoy the classes I was taking, I didn't enjoy chemistry and stuff as much as I was hoping. I didn't. I just didn't know what to do with my life, I guess. So I just went home and started work, I guess. And that's just basically what ended up having to happen with May herself. Of course, I ended up going back, and as of last year, I'm officially graduated, so now I can finally start working on going from just a job to earn money to an actual career to bring myself up in life. So that feels really nice. I admit, even so, I will admit that now that college is over, it's like, okay, I have this degree. What next? Don't get me wrong, I do have some ideas for where I do want to go next, but I can't escape the idea of, will I be able to make anything of this? Will this just be a piece of paper in my hands? No matter how much I apply to other jobs or use these qualifications. Questions are always there, but if I have to, I can live it a day at a time, just like May ends up deciding. And I do know that there's a bit more of the story as well, with the Greg path. I probably will do that eventually, but like I said, the B one is especially important to me personally, so I had trouble wanting to go outside that. But I am genuinely glad I replayed the game, and it's still as great as I remember. This would be very high on the list if I put it on there, but I don't want to put it on the list because it's not fair to the newer games who don't have a legacy of well, this is important to my past. That said, I will have to be honest and say, when I first played the game and got to Chapter 4 where we discover the strange cult people, I had mixed feelings, so I will be honest and say I wasn't sure because the game there, like I said, it was largely grounded and you couldn't tell if anything going on was actually supernatural or just the characters May's thinking too hard, worrying about it, but... And while that still technically is true, it's impossible for us to know if May's final confrontation with the Black Goat at the end was legitimate or was a legitimate real encounter with a supernatural being, or just her choosing to confront her problems head on. But I guess it's just kind of weird having those people attack, because like I said, it gives a pretty big first impression since it shows them if we first see that cult torturing a guy to death. That's pretty heavy given what the game has or will ever do after. But yeah, it did at least have a fulfilling conclusion, and even at the end where the pizza shop closed but then a new taco store opened up. Indeed, life goes on. Sorry, I might tear up thinking about it too much. But yeah, Night in the Woods is always going to be a special game to me on a very personal level. And I'm glad I was able to share it. Alright, what's after Night in the Woods? Okay, next up is Life is Strange. I'm afraid I cannot play any music from that because I got copyright strikes. Well, not copyright strike. I got copyright claims on my Twitch. So, not to mention, Life is Strange also suffered from me getting a lot of internet issues at that time. Quite a few of the days have been split into several different parts, with one of them being broken into 10, which is also why I did not put this on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube in the future and wondering why, oh hey, you played Life is Strange, why can't I find it? That's why. It requires it would require an awful lot of editing to get that together, and even then, because of the amount of gaps between them, it's pretty much incomprehensible, and even then, the copyrighted music would get me slammed by YouTube's bots, and I absolutely do not want to have to deal with that, so I apologize. Unfortunately, I'm also going to have to be very harsh and place this at the very bottom. Now, to be fair, I think Life is Strange suffers largely from being right after Night in the Woods, because both are about a character in college years trying to come to terms with the big changes in their life while in the later weeks of October. So it might just be that playing Night in the Woods set my expectations way higher than they should be. Because to be fair, I did like how Life is Strange had its little time travel gimmick to see all those different things, and some of the characters, like David, had a legitimately great character arc to them. I was very harsh on him at the start, but as I expected, he came around a lot and he became our most trusted ally. I think I was milking a bit at the end with the final choice, however, because at the end of the day, it's... Well, I guess I should start from the beginning, actually, since there's spoilers here no matter what. If I had to choose, I'd say chapters 3 and 4 were one of the stronger ones for Life is Strange. Because having Max use her powers to go back in time to try and undo a timeline entirely was actually a surprisingly ballsy move on the story's part, and I think it was legitimately interesting. After seeing what it does to everyone involved, it's just... Yeah, I can't blame her for wanting to go back and change it as well, but dang, the universe really hated Chloe. And don't get me wrong, I genuinely did not like Chloe. I tried to give her as much leeway as I could, but she really tried to make sure she was not... and I do get that's the point. She's not supposed to be a particularly nice person, and she's supposed to be a lot more around the edges, but I do wish Max had taken control, because it felt like for most of the story, Chloe was pulling Max by the nose the entire time, dragging her by the nose into what to do next. So when Max actually took the initiative, I think that's probably why I like Episode 3 a bit, because she takes the initiative to try and change the timeline completely by using her ability to change time to go into the time a photo was taken. However, Episode 5 is where unfortunately things really start going downhill. First of all, it did not escape my notice that while it was going to a journey to the center of the mind with Max there, it recycled a lot of assets just to make a sort of exploration or puzzle thing that I felt was just killing time at that point. And likewise, Mr. Jefferson being the main villain at the end was absolutely... Yeah, he did have a special interest in all those because it seemed like he was a nice teacher. You're supposed to... People compare it to a Scooby-Doo thing where the nice person at the start turns out to be the villain, but let's be fair here. Scooby-Doo at least tries to make a hint that anyone could be responsible, especially newer ones like Mystery Inc. I would absolutely say Mystery Inc. handled their twist villains better, rather than Life is Strange. Again, I don't hate the game, I don't dislike it. I do genuinely like how it handled some of the puzzles, like when we put all the clues together to try and figure out where it was. And I do think that Nathan Prescott was a far better villain than Mr. Jefferson was, because while it was clear that he had some problems, that his family was absolutely refusing to give him the help he needed, it did not try to excuse his actions. So he was clearly working against, So it was clearly trying to find a way to catch him and stop him from capturing any others. Frankly, I think the story would have been a lot better if he had just been the villain at the end instead of trying to pull the twist with Mr. Jefferson, because even by the end I started noticing, yeah, they're trying to put it in a way so that I can't just use my time to undo my choices anymore. I need to start being decisive. And I admit I was kind of milking at the end with the final choice about whether or not to save Chloe. Don't get me wrong, like I said, I don't hate Chloe. I did not want her to die. I did not want anyone to die, but she accepted her fate, and it seems the universe seemed to want it to end with her at the end. And it's even worked out, since because Nathan shot her in the ending I chose, it led to him being caught and finally preventing his family from being able to use their influence to keep things under wraps. And because of David's paranoia, we knew we could trust him, that if we let him know about it, he'd be able to stop what was going, including catching Mr. Jefferson. So it did work out in the end. I'm glad it did, but... Yeah, I guess it's just... And I do know there's some various interpretations of the ending, but my interpretation of that was that neither of these endings felt particularly good, but we did what we had to do, I guess. Like I said, I think it just hurt because I put it right after Life is Strange was played right after Night in the Woods. And while I do know there's some other Life is Strange games, including one, True Colors, which just came out, which I don't think I'm going to be continuing with the series. If I do, at best it's going to be it's not going to be Before the Storm, which is the sequel to this one. It's probably not going to be two there. Well, maybe it'll be 2. Well, like I said, unfortunately, while I did like Life is Strange, I did find a lot of things falling behind. I guess it's one of those games where I feel, ooh, I can see a lot of greatness here, but it falls just a bit short, if that makes any sense. Maybe I'll look into it more if I decide to continue the series, but for now I have no plans to do any of the Life is Strange 2 or True Colors. But I am glad I did Life is Strange, and I do think it was a worthwhile playthrough, because like I said, I was going through... I did genuinely enjoy episodes 3 and most of 4. That said, I also admit that I might have been oblivious at some point, because while I did know that some people like to pair up Chloe and Max, I did not see the relationship as that kind of thing. In fact, when I chose the kiss option, I felt it the same as when I chose the kiss option for Teddy in Persona 4. I felt it was purely to mess with the person who, thinking, oh, you don't think I'm gonna do that? I'll call your bluff. Though I did find it funny later when in the game him poked fun at how I had gotten Max to kiss everyone I possibly had the option for, and I'm like, huh, didn't realize that. But yeah. Definitely not an experience I regret, but I'm afraid I have to put it at the bottom here so far. Oh well. Alright, now let's what's after Life is Strange. Next up is Age of Wonders 3 and the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links, and both of those are games I've played before, so they do not qualify. The Age of Wonders franchise is still very close to my heart, however, so... rest assured this game is genuinely great, it's just, they can't qualify because I didn't first play it in 2021. On that note, I'm kind of surprised Age of Wonders 3 actually seems to do fairly well on my YouTube channel. Well, granted, none of my videos get very many views because no one really watches me, but I've actually got a handful there, so I guess I might have to pay attention to that. Now let's see here, what's after this? Now let's see, what's after, let's see here. Oh, it looks like there's let's see here, it looks like it's mostly Warcraft Age of Wonders and, Yu-Gi-Oh! For a bit. Let's go here. Digimon Cyber Sleuth, The Complete Story. Now let's see here. Let me find a good song here. Let's go with the main theme of Hacker's Memory. Let me see if I can find that here. Can I get an extended one so that it doesn't repeat? I don't want it repeating if I can avoid it. Let's see here. There we are. Digimon Cyber Sleuth. Okay. This one I got mostly because it was on sale, but despite Digimon not being one of the monster franchises that I am particularly familiar... I am as close to... I do have some familiarity with it, seen some of the anime adaptation stuff, and I don't dislike it at all, so I'm glad I gave it a go here. Let's see here. The first game, I feel this overall story was quite good, actually. Even the detective stuff here, having to deal with people having lost their souls to the digital world, that was engaging there. But I do think Hacker's Memory is a bit stronger, and I think that's because the characters are a lot more connected. I mean, Reggie, Erica, all those are a lot more active in the plot, and they do a lot. I mean, the fact that you seem to not be active there despite being named and having a unique design kind of gave me away the fact that he was going to be important there. I had fun playing around with the monsters, making interesting teams, and of course by the end I decided to just show off my ability to grind like no other by maxing everyone out. The game's only real flaw is that it's a bit grindy, because in both games there were times I needed to do some off-screen grinding just to make sure I kept up with the enemy levels. So because you definitely, especially since if you want to experiment around, the levels reset and all that after all, but not too bad. And I got to have some my old favorites, create some new favorites, a memorable storyline, and I even got to witness the birth of Hoodiman, a mere champion level, and yet they were able to cause quite the commotion against the final boss. So, in fact, I think that's another thing. Because in the first game, the protagonist was able to go into the stuff directly. Actually, I should probably put on this list, but I'm not sure where. Let me see here. Unfortunately, I don't think I can say it's better than Persona 4, so we're gonna put it here. Yeah, the two games are separate, but since they are both two halves of the same, I figure I can put them together like this. It should be fine. So, pretty good. Wish I had more to say about it, but what can I say? It's just a really good monster collecting RPG where that's fun to mess around with the monsters. There's an engaging cast. I think I even mentioned, especially during Hacker's Memory, I wish the Shin Megami Tensei games had characters this well written, because I would genuinely like to hang out with the Hootie crew in person. They seem like pretty swell fellas. And I also do like that the protagonist in Hacker's Memory talks a bit more, because it feels more like he's involved with the story that way. Not to say that the original protagonist doesn't... Not to say that the Cyber Sleuth protagonist doesn't feel like they're a major in the story, they absolutely are. But I guess it just felt like, I guess I just want to know what they were feeling, what they were thinking, because they didn't feel like a proper, a completely blank self-insert. But yeah, you can tell, and I did like the gameplay additions that Hacker's Memory added as well, such as the tactical battles, because that led me to get some really creative with some of the fights, and I really enjoyed that. And I didn't even lose people as much as I thought I would. Either I'm a lot better at strategy than I thought, or I panicked more than I needed to. Either way, yeah, this is definitely one of the top games in this year, that's for sure. Alright, let's see here. What was after Digimon? Oh yeah, quite a bit of Digimon actually, especially since the two games were pretty long in of themselves. But it just goes to show you how good a deal it is. Oh, I can't play music from Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion because I'm afraid that did get me hit on YouTube for the copyright claim, so I'm not going to be playing that, but I will say Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion. Where does that go here? Let's put it here. I'll go ahead and keep the Digimon playing while I discuss it. Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion is one of those games where I saw a streamer I like. I'm gonna be completely honest. I saw a streamer I like playing, and I thought, ooh, this is definitely something I want to give a try. But I don't regret it. It's a short and sweet game, you know, with a moderately engaging plot twist as well. Even with all the references and stuff outside, it's a perfectly legitimate game about to Turnip Boy dealing with a corrupt mayor and trying to figure out. And well, not trying to figure out, just accidentally discovers the origins of his own people. I guess the best comparison I can think of is when Adventure Time starts vaguely discussing a mushroom war, and then over time you start realizing, oh, this is actually a post-apocalyptic story, isn't it? That's pretty neat. Alright. Alright, next up is... let's see here... Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy of the Duelist. Alright, let's see here. What's a good song to play in the background? Does this have one? Okay, here was a good one. Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy of the Duelist. I picked this one up because I had been doing Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links for a while, but I wanted to do some proper Yu-Gi-Oh! But I didn't want to do one of the online simulators, so I figured... this one looks good because it was given... it gives reference to all the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series instead of just the original, which is also why I decided to choose the Arc 5 one for this little background here instead of the original, though I might still do the original in a bit. But yeah, since even the extended one here isn't very long, so I might change it a bit. But yeah, it covers a lot of really neat duels here. I got to play some of my old favorites like the Madolche cards, the Mayakashi cards, and I even learned some new favorites like Trains and the Trains and Cosmo, which I did not know Cosmo was an archetype that existed before now, but I am very glad it did. It's genuinely fun. Unfortunately, it does suffer a bit from the fact that there's very little music there, including from this. I was hoping it had some music from each series each time, but it uses mostly the same handful of songs each time. Well, I guess it's not as big a deal because I was focusing on the duel. It's still a bit disappointing. It also chose some weird changes. Now, some changes were good, like, for example, it skips over most of the Synchro dimension during the Arc 5 storyline, which is good because in the actual series, that one was drawn out for way, way, way too long. But then it makes some real strange changes, like not having the Supreme King Jaden duel in GX, which is a shame, because that's one of my favorite ones, and also a pretty big character moment, since the hero's gone evil, so now the other characters have to use what he taught them in order to bring back his heart from the darkness. Really, some really good stuff. With that in mind, I think I'm unfortunately gonna have to put this closer to the bottom here. Especially because... oh my, I have to get this longer, don't I? Let's do that. Here we are. Yeah. Especially since when apparently the reason Vrains was so short and didn't have any dialogue is because while the duels are in fact from the Vrains series, they didn't have the story recap at all. And apparently that's because the Link Evolution stuff is all from DLC of the original Legacy of the Duelist. Which is a bit disappointing, especially since Vrains does start really well and have kind of a weak ending. It did at least have some really nice plot points I was hoping to go through. Though it also did suffer from a lot of anime-only decks, like Robopi having to use Morphtronics because his appliance deck doesn't actually exist in the real card game. I did like how they got creative with those, but unfortunately it does mean we get to lose some really big emotional points, like Robopi having to fight with himself, about one of him trying to go nuts. Part of him trying to go nuts as an AI that decides, well, if I'm this smart, clearly I should be the one to rule the world. Another part of him that's the cleaner robot he was originally, where as long as the family clean store is happy, he's happy. Ending. That was I wish I'd gone into more of those events during Brains, because while I did do an okay recap of the whole thing, I skip over quite a bit. But then again, I guess the game was even worse in that aspect, and unfortunately that means it probably deserves to be really close to the bottom there. In fact, I'm kind of debating putting it even below Life is Strange, because at least Life is Strange had some interesting work with the time travel powers. But at the same time, I did genuinely enjoy at least the dueling part of Legacy of the Duelist, even if the story... At the same time, the whole reason I wanted to do Legacy of the Duelist at the start was because it gave tribute to all the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series at the time. And I must emphasize that it was at the time, because Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s was not out at the time the game came out, which is unfortunate. And apparently the Yu-Gi-Oh! 8 has been confirmed as well. Apparently it's going to be another Rush Duel. If the Rush Duel makes it to Steam, I'd have to check. I may try that, but... I don't know. If I do more Yu-Gi-Oh! On this stream, it'll probably be some more Duel Links. Again, I must emphasize that I don't hate anything in the, this list. I'm glad I played every single one of them, and that does include Legacy of the Duelist, but honestly, I'm tempted to put Legacy of the Duelist even below Life is Strange, but... For as much as Chloe was forced on into the story, I might have to keep it a bit lower, because I probably would have been fine with her more if Max had been more willing to talk with her more rather than just get led by the nose so much. Alright, let's go on here. What's after Yu-Gi-Oh? Streets of Rogue is another one that cannot qualify because I've been playing that for years now. The ones that do not qualify are not in any particular order, so there's no ranking there. Let's see here. Let's see here. Alright, now let's go with another one here. Now what's next? Oh dang. Is there an extended version of... Okay, next is Fuga Melodies of Steel. Is there an extended one? There does not actually appear to be. That is strange. Even Iconoclast had an extended version of one of their songs. I guess Fuga Melodies of Steel must be really obscure if they don't even have that. Let's see if I can find something here. Alright, Fuga Melodies of Steel. Now, this was a genuine surprise. This came out of... This game came out almost out of nowhere. And I actually didn't even know it was part of the Little Tail Bronx series. Had I known that, I would have had a bit more of a higher expectation. Then again, maybe I might have had higher. I might have. I need to get my words right. How do words? I did not know what to expect from the game when I first started. That's also why I was possibly even a bit more harsh to character designs than I might normally be. But if I had known it was from the Little Tail Bronx series, I would have known it's in good hands. And it did surprise me. I kept trying to compare it to Final Fantasy stuff like the Ultima Weapon and stuff as things went by, but honestly... Also, I don't know why I kept mispronouncing the Vanargand as Vanagrand. I genuinely have no idea. This one... It was definitely a surprise in all aspects. The gameplay was really fun. The story was pretty... It took its sweet time at parts, I'm not gonna lie. But when it does get going, you genuinely can't... It genuinely has a lot going for it. Right. Yeah, I kept trying to compare Final Fantasy, but in reality, it felt more like a Fire Emblem game, I guess, since it's about a bunch of kids whose hometown is invaded by the evil Empire of the Hour. They discover themselves an ancient super weapon and go to try and rescue their families to stop the Empire. Oh, on that note, the AI Jean, apparently the one on the radio specifically, is referred to in the game files as Black Jean. That's right, Jeanne d'Arc Alter is even in this game. And that was pretty fun to learn. On that note, the dude at the end who criticizes that the animals must be just as bad as humanity and will destroy themselves, was using the Vanargand War as proof. I will call bullshit on that because the whole war between the Burman Empire and the Gasco nation was caused by Jean, who was a creation of humans. And I'm also glad that I did not try and look over the story stuff on stream because I was 100% correct. That is Fate / Kingdom Hearts / whatever big plot stuff, so I'm glad that I kept it simple to what was just there. But dang, I do not know where to place this. Unfortunately, I can't place it above Persona 4 because while there are some lulls in that game, you can usually at least make things more interesting through doing stuff with the with some of the things in the town or in the city. Here when well, I guess that's kind of the thing. Fuga Melodies of Steel, when I looked it up, apparently it's been in development hell for quite some time, actually. And their budget got split into thirds. The budget and team got split into, like, thirds. Oh, the song already ended. Let's see if I can find something else here. Is there another song I can... Let's see, is there another one I can listen to? Here we are, the battle against Schweinhawks. Boss battle. The music in this game was really good. Some of it even sounds like something out of a Fire Emblem game now that I think about it. Like, actually, let's see if I can find... Yeah, this could sound like something out of Three Houses, for example. Let's see if I can find another one. Let's see if I can find another one. Yeah, Crescendo. This sounds like something out of the Tellius Fire Emblem Saga, the ones with Ike. Lots of good music here. And honestly, I think this is the one that made me, between this game and XCOM, Enemy Unknown, it made me really look back at the Fire Emblem series and think, wow, this game had a really good story with some... it was a pretty straightforward good and evil story with not too much, but they did have a bit of gray here with some of the characters. I mean, for example, they do establish that Jean had started the whole thing in order to fulfill her program mission to destroy the Vanargand once and for all. But, of course, and of course, Schweinhawks was a very intimidating villain. I quite liked him as a bad guy. And and the protagonists were of course, very likable. I did like that they had the support conversations / social link stuff to keep things going. In fact, I really think that, speaking of Three Houses, the Tyrannus hub area felt like what the Garreg Mach should have been as far as a hub area goes. And first of all, the Garreg Mach monastery is huge, but there's very little actually in it. Some people can hang out in various different areas, but at the end of the day, you use the quick travel a lot because it's a lot of travel time otherwise that doesn't have much to do there. The Tyrannus has everything in a small, compact area, and likewise, the Garreg Mach going back to Garreg Mach after every single chapter makes it feel a bit overused, which is a shame because I'm pretty sure the devs spent a huge amount of the development time on that. But meanwhile, the Tyrannus hub area is only used at certain interludes in the story, intermissions, right? And so it feels like it's utilized a lot better. I still do like Three Houses as a game. Fire Emblem Three Houses. It is genuinely a good game, but I have to say, it feels kind of funny that a team that had their budget and team slashed managed to make a lot much better hub system. Oh, right, let's, here's a good one. The final chapter theme. I still love this one, and this, again, this sounds like something out of Three Houses, or at least in my opinion. And Three Houses has genuinely good music. That's really nice. Hmm. Let's see here. That said, I do wish a lot of the skills are vary in usefulness because a lot of them don't tell you exactly what they do. Well, like it turns. Remember, like if you've watched the stream, have you? I use Jin a lot, and his ultimate move is Geo Flare. Apparently, that's actually one of the most powerful skills in the entire game. But aside from just saying strong AoE damage to ground foes, it doesn't tell you that, which is a shame because I would have spammed a lot more if I knew that. Likewise, if I were to play again, I'd probably use Chick a lot more because inflicting stun to delay enemy turns a lot more is extremely useful. My strategy was to smoke them so that they would be more likely to miss while I tried to deal damage through cannons, Jin, and burn damage, which isn't too bad. Burn dot damage, which is pretty good, but probably not the most efficient strategy. Though if I played again, I'd still use Jin because while he doesn't seem to be too popular, I think his raw damage is actually quite good. Especially since he could just obliterate so many ground-based foes. But yeah, if I had to make a main flaw, I think the game could use the main story was in a bit of a was not in a hurry to get anywhere because after the first few chapters it takes its sweet time. Though I did like a few of the villains, like General Pretzel and his daughter. Schweinhax was a good villain, as I said, and but not all of them were like those twin generals I forget the name of. They were pretty clearly just filler, as indeed were many chapters where you don't even face a named enemy, since a bunch of them were just meet new party member. Bruh. I guess at the end of the day, the game needed a bit more of everything, because it could have used a bit more to the combat. It's a bit. Well, the combat was good. It did feel like it was missing something. The final boss was pretty much. I've looked at the HP listed in the stream. I looked at my VODs to see the final boss actually had the same aim, HP as he did back in Chapter 10 when you faced the preview, which does feel a bit disappointing that he didn't have too many new tricks, but I guess after the halfway point, the game becomes a lot easier simply because you can figure out all kinds of broken combinations, be it stalling the enemy with Chick or smoking and nuking the enemy with Jin like I did. Mm, I'm not sure. I want to put it above Digimon Cyber Sleuth, but do I want to put it? I'm not sure if I can and justify it because, but then again, it doesn't. It's a lot more straightforward. A lot more. There's no grind involved. It just immediately stuff there, and at the end of the day, dang, it's not going to be Persona 4. I can tell you that much. But or maybe, yeah, it's not going to be Persona 4, unfortunately. But better than Digimon? I don't know. Guess I could put these about on the same level. You know what? Let's do it here. All right, we'll put Fuga Melodies of Steel here. Now, what was after Fuga here? Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Now, I've always loved the Ace Attorney series, but even by their high standards, I feel like Great Ace Attorney Chronicles was a cut above the rest. It doesn't have any combat, but the puzzles are there. Most the failures were all entirely my fault. So yeah, the opening of the second game when I ended up deciding to go with the thing that told me the solution, I blame myself for that was entirely 100% on me. I was an idiot who should have gotten that. Likewise, when I got stuck in later ones, like in the a morgue puzzle, well, that was once again well, not the morgue. It was the more trying to figure out the mortician with find the contradiction or story. Yeah, I wasn't sure, but dang, I Yeah, I messed up really bad. It feels like the only major flaws were on my own side here. The story was very complex, but I was able to catch on a lot of things, like when Sholmes was using technical terms, like saying, "Oh, that's what I told them." I thought, okay, yeah, that means it's not necessarily true. It just means you're saying that. And it wrapped up everything in a neat little bow. In fact, even during the case that I thought would be filler, where I said, "Oh, we'll probably never see this guy again." No, it turns out he's actually very plot relevant, and I did not realize at the time. The game had a lot of pleasant surprises. All right, I should probably let's see here. Let's see here. Ah, there we are. Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. I went in here with high expectations, and this game was even better than those, if you can believe that. The jury system added an additional layer of complexity, since you don't just have to solve the mystery, but you need to make sure that you keep them on your side. And it's not just filler either, because you have to use them to try and help further the story as well. Likewise, a lot of a writing there. I did like that Judge Jigoku actually turned out to be plot relevant in the end. And likewise, I think I mentioned, but I did like how they made Sholmes as an actual character rather than just instantly solving force of nature there. He has his own flaws where he overthinks things, and so he needs someone to help him out, as we saw with his Watson or with us. Or, I'm sorry, Wilson. The game felt like it took a lot of the flaws, because there's a meme in the Ace Attorney fandom is that the third case is usually the most boring one. Um, or something like that. What was the fourth one? Yeah. But yeah, one of the middle cases in each game is usually a filler and usually as a result ends up a lot less interesting than the others by comparison, even if the case itself is perfectly fine, but this game does not have that. The series had been suggesting a jury system for quite some time, but they didn't do that, even in later games like Dual Destinies and Spirit of Justice, which is rather disappointing. But here I think they made it rather well. And while I did call that they were going to pull a Damon Gant with a male Strongheart there, I have to admit, he was actually a very good villain, because even after I called it, the dude had Charisma 100, because remember, the final case kept on because we managed to keep the crowd on our side to see about seeing more people testify, even when that didn't seem necessary. Yet the moment we call him out, he was able to just say a few words, then suddenly the crowd is suddenly on his side. The crowd knows he was involved with everything. They know he ordered the murder. They knew he was the true Reaper Bailey, but that he was able to convince them that it was a necessary evil and that he was needed in order for Britain to have a bright future. That was genuinely unnerving. You can even hear it in my voice back when I was playing, honestly. Yeah, frankly, even after all this time, I still feel that this is hands down, the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles are hands down the best of the Ace Attorney games, and that is not praise I give easy. Yeah. I mean, heck, we start out with Naruhodo is not only... Renosuke Naruhodo is not only just a student at the start of the story, he's not even a student of law, he's just a medical student. He just ends up getting caught up in something beyond his understanding and ends up a lawyer, and yet he sticks to it with like glue. Man, maybe it's my love of detective stories, maybe it's that I just like the series, but I'm seriously tempted to put this above even Persona 4, if you can believe that. But should I? Dang it. This is such a hard one. Persona 4 technically has both writing and gameplay, but the writing in Great Ace Attorney Chronicles is a step above. But the gameplay is lower as well. Likewise, I actually might replay Persona 4 or Fuga Melody Steel or even Digimon, but not this one in the future, but... Part of me wants to put it above Persona 4, part of me wants to put it below Fuga. Even just hearing this now, though, oh, it's extremely memorable. You know what? I know it's probably horrendously biased, but top of the list. Sorry, Persona 4, but even my SMT love uh, is having a hard time justifying here. Alright. Now what's after Great Ace Attorney Chronicles here? The original Deus Ex. I'm afraid this one is another does not qualify. Because this is another does not qualify because I have played this game before. I guess I should clarify as Deus Ex 1 because it's a franchise after all. Now let's see here. What's after this? No One Lives Under the Lighthouse. I don't believe they have anyone has music from that game separately because it's a smaller one, so we're gonna keep the Greatest Turn of music here. Now, I'm not too big of a horror person, but I did like the mystery aspect to No One Lives Under the Lighthouse, where the lighthouse keeper vanishes and we go there. It does keep some ambiguity whether it's the character going nuts from loneliness or the real stuff, but I like to think that it's a real thing and that the creature going after was also trying to work against the being that lives under the lighthouse, because it seems whether the character, regardless of whether the player character manages to kill the monster or the monster manages to kill the lighthouse keeper, apparently by killing the lighthouse keeper and not sacrificing him to be the next one, both endings ended with the lighthouse falling apart at the end, so seems that whatever was underneath the lighthouse was summoned there by the people who had originally lived on the island all that time ago. And the lighthouse keeper's son vanished, possibly exiled, possibly sacrificed. But that vulnerability is what allowed whatever was beneath the lighthouse to make him the first monster creature minion of some sort that would later then bring in all the others as time went by. It's a pretty neat game. I'm genuinely glad I played it. Short and sweet. Gonna have to figure something out here. Maybe I can move my little icon thing to the side a bit more. Here we are. Where could I put this? I think it's better than Turnip Boy commits tax evasion, so let's go ahead. I go through a lot of theories throughout that playthrough, which makes sense since it gives a lot of interesting evidence here and there, but I don't regret it. It was a genuinely good game. I'm meant to do for the Halloween special, and I might have to consider looking into more of those. I normally don't do a Halloween special, but we'll have to see how I'm feeling now that we're in 2022. Let's see here. Now let's see what's next. Hollow Knight. Okay, let's see here. Let's see. There we are. Hollow Knight. This was definitely one of those games that I'd been meaning to get to for quite some time, but never did until way, way long after. but it has aged very gracefully. This is a much better game. The show, this is a much better game as far as than it's better than Iconoclast as far as actual Metroidvania stuff because I mentioned from the start I had no intention of 100%ing it, yet went out of my way to do a lot of exploring in spite of that, just because it was that fun to see the new, unique areas. Despite having a darker color palette, they did not hesitate to use various colors to make each area feel very distinct. So it didn't get lost very easily, I guess would be the best way to put it. The combat system was also very fun. Like with Iconoclast, I really did enjoy it. And it even tells while it does have dialogue, it tells a lot of the story without actually saying words. I mean, we knew from a while ago that that Hollownest had been basically had made everyone under their ruling for a while. Well, and that the Pale King was making everyone worship him as a god king. And apparently the Radiants didn't like that and the plague. So naturally, they tried to resorted to mad science to force the plague to be controlled and hence make creating the titular Hollow Knight. This is definitely a game where the combat and the system of the visual aesthetic and the story told through the gameplay all really comes together really well. Well, I can't think of very many weak parts of the game if we're completely honest. It could be because I finished it recently, but then again, I don't think that's quite the case, simply because, well, I've I started the game. Yeah, I had the game experienced many delays because I had originally meant to do it after Great Ace Attorney, but then October hit, and I figured I really need to start these things before there, and then of course I had my computer troubles, and then Endwalker. That lasted so long that Endwalker came up, and I want to do that, so it was a bit of a rough one, but I do not regret getting to the game at least. Even if it was split up, I still was thinking about it even during the times that I wasn't playing it, so I'm sure if I think about it, I could think of a decent amount of criticisms for it, but at the end of the day, it has a very good battle system that I think mentioned almost felt like a dance. In fact, the battle against the Mantis Lords especially felt as a good example. A good early game fight that genuinely felt like a dance there. Right, and I'm not sure how to rate it, honestly. So few weaknesses here. And part of me is starting to wonder if I put Persona 4 a bit too high, because as great as it is, it does have a it does have a few characters that are nobly weaker than the others, in spite of what they doing quite a bit. But at the same time, I mean, even if I put it below Fuga, am I going to sit here and say that Fuga's cast is? Actually, you know what? I think Fuga might have utilized its cast better, or in some ways, because it's very small. It's a smaller cast, so they're able to focus on developing them more individually. They're children, so they don't really have their own. They're not going to have a big backstory or anything to that. So for most of them, it's what they plan to do in the future and what they enjoy in the present. And I don't think that's bad. Persona 4. And again, Persona 4 has a much better villain because Adachi is a much easier to relate villain. Well, I shouldn't be going to those because right now we're on Hollow Knight. And frankly, the game has very few weaknesses, so you know what? New top game, Hollow Knight. I do not regret placing it even above Greatest Attorney Chronicles because at the end of the day, it just brings everything together so well, which is especially a big deal because it was, even at the time, it had a lot of stuff. Yeah, it had a lot of competition is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. It's generally one of the best games I played this year. Yeah, even if I argue that my SMT bias might be putting Persona 4 a bit higher than it deserves to be, that still means Knight, Greatest Attorney, Fuga, and Persona 4 are definitely among the top games of the entire year. Didn't you play Final Fantasy VII in 2021? No, Final Fantasy VII was played during 2020, along with Final Fantasy IX as well. Also, welcome to welcome to the stream, my choo-choo train. Yeah, Final Fantasy VII and 9 were both in 2020, so I'm afraid they do not qualify for this list, but they would definitely be pretty high up here if they could, because they are genuinely great games as well. Well, in fact, I didn't expect Final Fantasy VII to age as well as it has with its message about about over corporate too much corporatism stuff. No, I keep thinking 2020 games. Oh yeah, I had to check the date on a lot of some of these just to make sure. Streets of Rogue denied. Yep, unfortunately. Okay, time flies. Yeah, I know how that feels. There's definitely a lot here though thinking, wow, I did that during this year, or wow, that was actually 2020. Some of them, like, yeah, Slime Rancher and even Romancing Saga 2 were back in 2019, actually. I'm not sure how I have those, but I don't have the VODs for Danganronpa or Zero Escape, which really sucks because while those were definitely the ones that got me started with streaming to begin with, and those are definitely some of the more fun ones. I could always replay them, but the problem is the reason I streamed them was to get my original reactions on stream. Yeah, sadly no Zero Escape, but I do have AI the Somnium files at least, both here and on my YouTube channel. So, and rest assured, AI the Somnium Files 2, the Nirvana Initiative, is absolutely going to be on here as well. But yeah, dang, that's a lot of really, really good games this year. Ooh, but we still have one more. Indeed, I did briefly mention it before. Unfortunately, I can't do music from that because when I uploaded the VODs to YouTube and scheduled them for upload, there were a metric buttload of uh, copyright claims, so unfortunately I won't be able to post those here. Uh, Actually, maybe I can. Let's see here. Because that's the Endwalker is the last one that Endwalker admit I'm a bit on the fence with because technically speaking, that is a new game. The expansion came out this during 2021. However, the game itself has been around for 10 years now and has had updates and all of which you need in order, all of which are come together in Endwalker. So on one hand, I'm not sure if I should put Do Not Qualify because it has an advantage over all these others, or if I should anyways, because this was a pretty, Endwalker had a pretty big thing. Let's see here. Might be able to do this one. There's no extended. Extended. Let's see if I can find one. There is not. There's the regular boss theme extended, but the mid boss theme is the one I want here. I cannot use. Let's see here. I cannot use anything that has lyrics because Square Enix smacks those like no other. Hmm. Darn it, I can't pick any of these that won't get hit by copyright, unfortunately. Alright, we'll just leave it for now. Endwalker was pretty heavy stuff. I mean, during the level 83, you end up body swapping with your main with someone who can't fight very well, and so you have to race against the clock. And of course, being the hero, the moment they saw someone was in trouble who was nearby, they immediately held off, even to save them, to try and save them, even though there was something more pressing at the time. And there was, which unfortunately ended badly, and then you have to literally crawl your way back there. And I did see the counter in the corner going down, so I thought, wait, does that mean I get back up afterward? And of course, the 85, the attack from the blasphemies, or as I call them, the witches at level 85s, was absolutely rough. I mean, a kid turns into a monster and then gets smashed by an even bigger monster. Once that happens, you're thinking, okay, nothing's off the table now. I was genuinely worried the Elephant Man trying to save Baby would ultimately fail, given how close they were to death, and then getting attacked. Gotta hand to my boy Astinian, he managed a lot there. Course, that learning the truth behind everything was a pretty big deal as well. In fact, now that I think about it, since I mentioned Final Fantasy IX earlier, it was pointed out to me that Necron, the final boss there, actually while he wasn't name dropped or anything beforehand, he does at least come back. He does at least come back to the whole themes of the game itself. Those being the despair, or fear, and nihilism. Uh, and which makes sense given Freya and Garnet lose their homes by the end. Vivi learns that he's going to have to deal with his mortality sooner or later, and Zidane has to deal with being a creation, no, create an artificial being. But I think the final boss of Endwalker, Medion, handled it a bit better, and it makes sense. Probably even might have thought, well, we want to do something similar to Necron, but let's put some build up there. Because going into Endwalker, they absolutely had to be sure that whatever they ended up putting in there, or it, what am I saying? The final boss could not be an already established character, because the entire thing is the final days, the apocalypse. The ancients themselves never figured out what it was. In fact, I think that's a big reason why Zodiark was only a stopgap measure. While it's nice that they wanted to bring back the people they lost with Zodiark, fact of the matter is their only response to the end of the world was to just use their creation magic to create an actual god to undo it for them. I can't see a timeline where that works permanently, because at the end of the day, the Endsinger would have just gathered more hopelessness and despair and eventually overpowered him. At least that's my theory. Yeah. So, and of course, I clipped that. I even clipped the final walk, the titular end walker at the end, simply because that scene got me so heavily. Just walking by yourself, with all those quotes from previously in the game. I mentioned a few times, but one of my biggest regrets was not saving the VOD for my Near Automata playthrough, because that gave me a lot of big emotional responses that I'll never really be able to give fresh like that. If I replay, I'm sure I'll cry and all that, but it won't be quite the same. I was just stuck, unable to move, basically unable to act while the stream was playing through the credits, basically, and well, post credits mostly. But yeah, oh, I think it was even the title screen by the time I finished. But Endwalker, I was crying pretty hard, but Endwalker got me to keep going in spite of that sadness. Nah. That's just really. Again, this is probably highly biased talking, but I can't place it anywhere else on this list. Simply nothing else comes close to that kind of emotional response, feeling, reflection, and yeah. That's all I can I've already gone into much more detail in my previous Final Fantasy 14 streams. I might looking through this list again. I see a few. Like I do think genuinely think I'm being kinder to Persona 4 than I probably should be. Yeah. In fact, I might put it below Fuga or possibly even Digimon as well. But at the same time, it's still a genuinely great game in spite of its flaws. But well, all right. You know what? I think I'm being a bit Well, then again, I'm opening to admitting this is a lot of my biases. So that's not inherently. This is, after all, my top list. I'm sure some people would have found some of these lower on the list to be better than some of the higher ones. Like I said, this 2021 was a great game, was a great year of streams for me, and I'm really glad I did every single one. Really glad I did every single one of them, and I'm glad I've also started keeping record of my streams because even if no one else watches the VODs, being able to watch them for myself and see my reactions yet again, that's just something special, I think. So yeah, there's a lot of biases in here, maybe a bit too many in some. You know what, let's do this, yeah. It's gonna bug me since that's standing out the most. Again, these are all... Yeah, these top 5 are still absolutely incredible games. I still recommend them all, but it's hard to say. Who knows, maybe even tomorrow I'll wake up and think, ah, I should redo this list again. Because at the end of the day, something like my favorite game streamed in 2021 is something that's always going to be changing my thoughts on. Some things will resonate with me bit more at one time than another. Maybe I'll go back after playing the Somnium Files 2 and think, you know what, I was a bit too harsh on Somnium Files 1. I should put it a bit higher. Or yeah, my point is, this is absolutely not a definitive list. This is not going to be absolute. My opinions are likely going to change even when I wake up in the morning compared to what it is now, but I'm glad I did this because a recap like this and given a chance to discuss is just really nice, even though all I really did was just talk for 2.5 hours now. And I guess while I wrap up here, the artist who I commissioned to do the icon in the middle here is Landmonigans on Twitter. In fact, I'm gonna post their Twitter right there in the chat, just so that everyone has a link to it. Gotta credit your artists. There we are. Yeah, they do some really, really nice work. I recommend them. But yeah, so even if it's just for the moment, these are my thoughts on my streamed all the games I streamed during 2021. I'm glad I did. Like I said, I'm glad I did each and every one of them. I look forward to doing more streams in 2022. What? If you're a fan of ones like Streets of Rogue, Age of Wonders 3, or Duel Links, rest assured I'm going to be doing a bit of those throughout the year yet again because they make nice filler. If you rather something full, rest assured I'm going to be starting a new game pretty soon, actually. That link is past the stream now. Yeah, unfortunately, can't do anything about that. So, dang, what a year. A lot happened in 2021, both in the stream and in real life, since, as I said, I finally graduated, and I finally graduated after going back to college. I finally feel like feel really happy finishing what I started back before I, flunked out the first time. And of course, there's so me and other family members are all moving various places because there's a lot going on. There's just a lot. 2021 was a really hectic year, is what I'm saying, but it also had a lot of great games, and I look forward to seeing what 2022 brings, both in my personal life and as I stream more. Oh, thank you, Machu. Thank you, Machu Choo Train. Yeah, it feels really nice having that great burden off my shoulders. All right. Alright, so he's starting up a new game next time, so look forward to that. I'll be doing more of some of the do not qualify ones for filler, because like I said, I do like filling time with stuff like Age of Wonders or Streets of Rogue or Duel Links. Might even see about doing some more filler with mobile games, but until next time, thank you for watching, hope you had a good time, and I'll see you later.